Hey guys, so today's video is another installment in my repurposing makeup series, and this video is all about ways to repurpose your bronzers and contour products. I have a bunch of tips to share with you of alternative ways to use a bronzer or contour if, let's say, maybe you don't like using it for its intended purpose, maybe you find it a little bit too deep on your skin tone or too orange or it just doesn't quite work right as a bronzer. I've got a bunch of other ways that you could put those products to use and get your money's worth, or maybe if you are trying to pan one of these products, you're trying to use a bronzer up, these are some ways that you can get even more use out of them. So I'm going to demo as many of the tips as possible on my face today, and let's go ahead and get into it. So I have my foundation and concealer on already, and I'm going to be demonstrating the tips as we go as I do a full face of makeup. Also, if my eyes seem watery today, I promise I'm not on the verge of tears. My eyes have just been so watery these past few days. I think I just have some sort of allergies. So my first alternative way to use a bronzer is to use it to apply fake freckles. So today I'm going to be demonstrating this with the Milani Silky Matte Bronzer in Sunkissed, and I chose this one for a couple reasons. One, it is matte. I would recommend this for a matte bronzer. Probably wouldn't recommend it for a really shimmery or glowy bronzer. And this one is also kind of a neutral tone because I do have neutral undertones to my skin. So if I'm going to do faux freckles on my skin, I don't want them to be too warm or too cool. I want them to be kind of somewhere in the middle, so that's why I chose this. So for this, I'm actually going to be using a little angled brow brush, but what would be even better is one of those little detailed straight like liner brushes that's just kind of like a little pointy. I'll pop a picture on the screen of what I'm talking about because obviously I don't know how to describe it in words. I've been meaning to get a brush like that for the longest time and I keep forgetting, so I'm just going to use an angled brush, and I am just going to focus the pointy tip of this on kind of the longer side into the powder. See how I'm only focusing the point of the brush into the bronzer. And I'm actually doing this before I've applied powder, so I'm just going to take the tip of that brush and just start to dot on little freckles across my nose. Alright, I've got you completely zoomed in so you can see even better. So I am just taking that very pointy tip of the brush and dotting on little freckles, and I'm kind of varying the amount of pressure that I'm applying so that they don't all look the exact same. And I'm doing this before powder so that when I apply, and I'm just going to use a translucent powder over this, it'll kind of help to soften them and just make them mesh into my skin a little bit better. I love the look of faux freckles. I've also done faux freckles with a brow pen as well. I think I like this method even better. And honestly, I feel like this looks even more natural than a brow pen, and I imagine also more natural than a freckle pen. I just messed up. And the nice thing about doing this before you've applied powder is if you do make a mistake, I'll just take my foundation sponge and tap it out, and it just completely erases it. So it's very, I would say this is probably the most foolproof method of faux freckles that I've tried. It looks so cute. I love it. Okay. And then I might just take my finger also and tap over any of the freckles that I feel like look too harsh. This just kind of also helps blend those into my skin. I like it. And you could also do this with a cream bronzer, or if you had a liquid bronzer. I don't currently have a liquid bronzer in my collection, but you could just take some of that on the back of your hand, kind of spread it out, and then dip into that with your brush. And most of these tips apply to both bronzers and contours, by the way. Usually the difference is that bronzers tend to be a little bit more warm, contours tend to be more on the cool side, so you just pick what looks best on your skin tone. Alright, so next I am going to go ahead and powder my face. I'm going to use, like I said, I'm going to use a translucent powder so that it doesn't really cover up the freckles too much. And then if I need to, I can kind of go over them, but I'm just using my e.l.f. Halo Glow Setting Powder. Another great way to repurpose a bronzer is to use it as a brow powder. Now, of course, this is going to depend on the shade of your brows, but if you have like light taupe colored brows like I do, I typically, when I'm buying a brow product, I usually go for the shade taupe or blonde. And using that Milani bronzer again in the shade Sunkissed, this is typically the type of brow color I would go for as well, kind of a neutral to cool leaning color. So I'm actually going to take that same angled brow brush and use this to fill in my brows. Now I'm first going to go in with a brow wax that I happen to have. This is the e.l.f. Shape and Stay brow pencil. You don't have to do this, but I have found that when using a brow powder, this helps the powder to stick a little bit better than if you didn't use a wax. But if you don't have one on hand, you'll be fine without it too. So I just kind of draw that through my brows, and it just helps me to kind of push them into place, into the shape that I want. And then I will take my spoolie and just brush through them, working that wax through, and kind of, once again, get my brows into formation. And then I will dip into my bronzer and work it through. Okay, so that is with my brows filled in with the Milani Sunkissed bronzer. It definitely pulled a little warmer in my brows than what I would typically go for. I do have some warmth to my hair, but my brows themselves are pretty cool toned, so I do tend to prefer a cool toned brow. But it does also kind of make my brows match my hair color, so not the worst look. I'm actually going to try adding a little bit of my Oma contour stick. This is in the shade White Pearl. This is definitely more on the cool toned side, so I kind of just want to see how this applies also. We're just kind of experimenting today. I would recommend, if you're trying out any of these tips, try them out like right as you're getting ready for bed before you wash your face. That's a great time to experiment with different makeup techniques. If you're not sure how they're going to turn out, you're not sure if they're going to look quite right. That way you could try like one product in one brow, one in the other, just see which one turns out better. And that way if something doesn't turn out well, you're just going to wash your face anyway. Probably wouldn't recommend trying this like as you're getting ready for work or something. So I'm just taking some of that Oma contour stick through my brows just to see how that looks. I am going to just take some of my Urban Decay Brow Blade, the marker side, and just create a few little hair-like strokes here in the front. So there are my brows. Not my favorite brow look ever, I'll be honest. They are looking a little more warm tone than I typically like, but something to play around with. It's going to depend on your own hair color, your brow color, but for me, I would definitely want to stick to the cooler tone, like contour powders, I think, for my brows. Another great use for your bronzers is to mix them with your blush. I'm a big fan of almost like taupey brown rosy blushes, and I do feel like the perfect kind of taupey blush is hard to find, so I'm going to mix my Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Bronzer, which is the one that's currently in my project pan, with my Essence the blush in Befitting, and I just have a feeling this is going to create the most perfect taupe blush. Actually, maybe I should mix it with my Milani one. Actually, oh no, I just dropped my Essence blush. Okay, well, this just happened, so this fell on the carpet, which means I think I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out. Oh, my poor blush. Okay, I might repress this if it ends up crumbling, but it's mostly all in one piece, so before I dropped it, I did decide I want to try the Milani bronzer mix with this first, and then the Charlotte Tilbury one maybe on the other side just to compare. So pretty self-explanatory, but I'm just going to first tap my brush in the blush, and then in the bronzer, maybe back and forth. And sometimes, if I'm not sure how pigmented it's going to be, I might tap it off on my hand first just so I don't end up with too much. And let's see what it looks like. You know, this is kind of like making your own Bare Minerals bronzer, right? Because that was sort of meant to be like a blush and bronzer in one. It's kind of the same thing. Okay, that is pretty. Really like that. Okay, now I'm going to try it with the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Bronzer in Fair, which is a little bit lighter than the Milani one. Okay, so I think both sides turned out great, pretty similar. This is the side that I mixed with the Milani bronzer, and this is the side that I mixed with the Charlotte Tilbury. You'll have to let me know which side you prefer. This one did end up a little bit warmer, but I like that. And if you're wanting to simplify your makeup routine also and not have to worry about where do I place my bronzer and then where do I place my blush, if you mix the two together, you can kind of just do a 2-in-1 and feed two birds with one stone. So my next tip, this is tip number 4, is to use your bronzers as an eyeshadow. This is a tip I've shared many times on my channel. It might seem like one of the more obvious ones if you've been here for a while, but hey, you might not have thought of it yet. So I like to use bronzers as a transition color or a crease color. I also really like to use the same bronzer that I'm wearing on my face on my eyelids as an eyeshadow because I find that it just helps to kind of tie the whole look together. So I'm going to do this with my Charlotte Tilbury bronzer here. This is the one in my Project Pan, like I said. And I'm just taking this on a fluffy crease brush and buffing that all throughout my crease. And I just love how warm and soft that looks. And I've also found, you might not think that using a bronzer as an eyeshadow would help you like pan a bronzer any faster because you might think you're using so little on your eyelids anyway, and a bronzer is usually pretty big, but honestly, I feel like this helps me hit pan and use up bronzers even faster because I am using a more targeted brush, whereas on my face I tend to use a more diffused brush for bronzer, so I might not be picking up that much for my face, but on my eyes I do end up, you know, picking up quite a bit of product. So there's that bronzer in my crease. I'm also going to take some of my Milani bronzer, which again is a little bit of a deeper shade, and I'm going to use this on a smaller crease brush, more of a detailed crease brush. And this shade I'm going to use to just kind of define my crease a little bit more since it is almost more of a contour color anyway, so I'm literally just using this shade to contour my eyelid a little bit. Once again, a great way to cut back on the amount of time you're getting ready to and the amount of products that you're using. Let's say you're traveling and you just don't want to bring too many products with you, or you just prefer a more minimal makeup routine. Multitask your products, and you would be surprised how many different things you can do with just one product alone. Now, of course, I'm using I'm using like all my bronzers as examples today because I just want to show all the different ways you can do it, but you might be able to do all of this with just one bronzer also. And I'm also just going to blend some of that bronzer down to my lower lash line as well, just to give my eyes a little bit of definition. We're going for a super soft, like easy minimal look today. Then I'm going to go into my Aether Beauty Citrine Quad, which is in my current everyday makeup drawer, and I'm just going to take this light shimmer and tap that onto my lid. But you could also use your highlighter for an eyeshadow shimmer shade as well. That is another multitasking option. I also am going to just use my Charlotte Tilbury bronzer as a regular bronzer today and take some on my forehead just to warm that area up a little bit. It's me every time I'm trying to pan something, after I use it I'm like, is there a pan in there? No. Alright, I scooted back a little bit for this one because my next tip is to use your bronzers on the body, on like the collarbones, if you're wearing a tank top, on the shoulders. I like to just take my bronzer, swirl my brush all throughout it, and apply it to my collarbones, my chest, and I find that this helps to tie in my face makeup to my neck and chest as well. Sometimes my face ends up looking a little bit darker than my neck, so this helps to even that out, and it also just gives this area a nice kind of sun-kissed look. One tip that I can't demonstrate for you today because I don't have a liquid bronzer currently, but a liquid bronzer can be used to adjust the shade of a foundation or concealer that's too light for you. You just mix in a drop or two. I will caution you, I know some people like to also mix liquid bronzers with sunscreens. I highly advise against mixing anything with your sunscreen. It seems like the general consensus among dermatologists, cosmetic chemists, etc. is it's not a good idea to mix anything in with an SPF because that waters down the sun protection and you're not going to get the full SPF on the label, so just a little word of warning there. But bronzers are great to mix with any foundation or concealer to adjust the color. And another thing you could do if you want to use a powder bronzer to adjust the shade of a liquid foundation, you could scrape off a little bit of the powder bronzer with a spoolie, and you can mix that into a little tray or container that you have. You could use like the lid of something as a little mixing palette, or you could use like an actual makeup mixing palette. And then in the same vein, if you have a face powder that's too light for you, you could mix a little bit of bronzer in with that. You could create a franken powder as well. I have a video showing how to repress makeup powders. It's the same principle, you're just taking two different powders and mixing them together, pressing them usually with rubbing alcohol. That typically works well with most powder formulas. And then I also do have a YouTube short that I did a long time ago showing how I made a franken bronzer out of eyeshadows, but again, it's the same exact process that you use for both. So I highly recommend just getting creative, mixing, matching, create franken products, just have fun. Really the whole idea behind this video is get creative, think outside the box. There's so many different ways that you can use your makeup products outside of their intended purpose. And then similarly, if you have a bronzer that's too dark, you could mix some of that with a face powder to lighten it. You could either just do that separately, like the same way that I mixed the blush and bronzer together, just dip your brush back and forth, or of course to get a more even color, you could create a franken powder. You can also create a loose powder bronzer out of a pressed powder if you prefer a loose version, or if your bronzer has gotten to the point where you've hit pan and you only have like a small ring around the edges, you can crush it up. You could use a spoolie. Again, spoolies are a great little tool to have to just finely crush it up, and you could decant it into a translucent setting powder container if you have one on hand to reuse, or just put it into a little container, tap some out into the lid, and apply it as a loose bronzer that way. Another idea to use your loose bronzers, if you have brown hair, you could use a loose powder bronzer as a dry shampoo, and this way you won't get like that white cast in your hair the same way that you would with like a translucent face powder or like a traditional dry shampoo. And you could also use a bronzer kind of the same way we used it in my brows today to fill in your hairline. If let's say maybe you have thinning hair, I know a lot of people deal with that issue, you could use your bronzer, if it's a similar color to the color of your hair, to fill in any gaps and make your hair appear thicker. Alright, so there's my completed look with many of these bronzer tips applied to my face. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about these alternative ways to use bronzers. Let me know what tip you plan on trying it down below, and if you have any other tips I didn't mention, please share in the comments below so that we can all find new and fun ways to use these products. But I'm going to leave the rest of my repurposing makeup series linked below in a playlist. I've done blushes, highlighters, concealers, powders, lip products. Let me know if there are any other makeup categories you would like to see next. If you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on future videos. And if you want to go above and beyond in supporting me, feel free to check out the Patreon where I upload a bonus video each month. This month we're doing a live chat, so I hope to see you over there. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye!